Hi, my name's Ellie Waller, and I'm a guide at Neot Kedumim, a biblical landscape reserve just near Ben Gurion Airport and very near Modi'in. So this is me in my uniform. I'm actually wearing my uniform today as well, but for this occasion. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the Sukkot exhibition at Neot Kedumim. And the first thing I want to read is from Vayikra. This is the basic of all basics. It says, "You shall live in booths, Sukkot, 7 days, in order that future generations may know that I made the people of Israel dwell in booths, Sukkot, when I brought them out of the land of Egypt. I am the Lord your God." That's the basic imperative, that we should live in Sukkot on the festival, on the Feast of Tabernacles, on the festival of Sukkot. But let's go a little bit deeper. In Massechet Succah, Yud Aleph Amud Bet, it says, as it is taught in a Baraita, that the verse states, I made the children of Israel to reside in Sukkot. These booths were clouds of glory. This is the statement of Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Akiva says they established for themselves actual Sukkot. And I want to talk a bit about this difference of opinion and give a little bit of background to the event. So, Rabbi Eliezer ben Horkonas said that they are like the clouds of glory, ananei kavod, and this reflects the different understandings of the historical event that the Tanakh ties to the festival of Sukkot. Because there's a seeming anomaly. When the Israelites left Egypt and wandered in the Sinai desert, they needed tents, not booths. Tents fold up for each leg of a nomad's journey and can be set up again at any stopping place. Rabbi Eliezer was a farmer in his youth and therefore probably not intimately familiar with the nomadic life of shepherds or with the change of seasons in the Sinai wilderness. He may not have been able to reconcile sitting in real booths with the beginning of the rainy season in Israel around Sukkot time, around Sukkot. That is why Rabbi Eliezer believed that the booths must have been the Lord's clouds floating over the camp. But, on the other hand, Rabbi Akiva, who according to tradition had been a shepherd for 40 years, was familiar with the life of a wandering shepherd in the Sinai. Towards the end of summer, most greenery has disappeared and the cisterns and pools have dried up in the Sinai desert. Not the time to pasture. This is the time when the flocks are gathered together and the people move to a desert oasis of date palm groves where there's lots and lots of water. This is the time when the dates redden and ripen on the palms, when they are harvested and spread in the sun to dry, to be preserved as food for humans and for animals. All kinds of uses are made from the date palms. In fact, every part of the date palm can be put to use. In these oases, desert nomads set up camp in more permanent booths rather than tents. The booths are more durable, lasting 6 weeks to 3 months. Rabbi Akiva's assertion that the Israelites made real booths is proved by this mode of life, typical of nomads in the Sinai desert. That's one way of looking at this argument. Now let's get down to the nitty-gritty of the Sukkot exhibit in Neot Kedumim, where they took Massechet Succah and at Neot Kedumim, and all of the theoretical discussions about weird and wonderful Sukkot, they built them. They made life-size versions that you can walk in, climb in, sit in, so that we can understand better what it was like to, what these sukkot were like. So we ask the question when we walk around the exhibit, is this a sukkah? Is it a hut? Is it a booth? What is it? We ask at every point, is this a kosher sukkah? Yes, even this picture of a camel, is this a kosher sukkah? And we have lots and lots of examples of different sukkot, over 20 examples, I think. And I'm going to give you a taste of some of those different sukkot. So the first and probably the most famous of our sukkot is the very tall sukkah, very, very tall. It's probably had the most, it's been the most photographed of all the sukkot. And this is me and my friend Joe in this sukkah, where we read the Mishnah, the first halacha, the first daf of Massechet Succah, and we took our our hand breadths, our cubits, and we tried to measure if this sukkah was indeed taller than 20 amot, and it is. And it helps us understand why it was deemed invalid for the most part. Perhaps because the shade provided isn't provided by the schach, the roof, but it's provided by the walls. Or it could be that you can't even see the schach without really giving yourself a crick in the neck. You have to strain to see the roof, to see the schach, so you might not even be aware that you're sitting in a sukkah. Or you could say, it's such a tall sukkah, it's such an enormous sukkah, it doesn't fulfill the definition of being a temporary dwelling. It's got to be far more solid to be so tall. So that was the too tall sukkah. And now we're going to look at the opposite issue. We are going to look at the too small sukkah. And over here we've got my friend sitting in a teeny tiny sukkah, the too small sukkah, and she's measuring her tfachim. She's measuring her fists to see if how many there are, and there aren't enough. It's too small, so it's regarded as a non-kosher sukkah, not fit for use on the festival. Here we have the double-decker sukkah, and yes, you can go to the sukkah exhibit and climb up the ladder as we did, and sit up there and look at the unbelievably beautiful view and ask yourself, is this a kosher sukkah? And for all intents and purposes, on the second floor, it's good. It's got walls, enough walls, it's got a roof, it's got a floor, you're fine. The problem is when you're discussing the bottom floor, the bottom sukkah, and the issue being the roof of the bottom floor. If it's too solid, it's not going to be a roof of a sukkah. It's going to be a roof rather than schach, and it will invalidate the sukkah. The question is whether it's a bit of if it's not such a solid roof, and you can rely on the roof of the top floor, and then you could be said to be in a kosher sukkah on the bottom floor. So it depends. The answer is it depends. And there's a little picture of a sukkah inside a sukkah. Next sukkah. We have a sukkah in the shape of an A, like this, where the two walls are balancing on each other. And we read, next to each of the sukkot in the exhibit, we have a sign with the relevant excerpt from the Mishnah or Gemara or what have you. And that's what you read when you go around. And here it says, if one made a sukkah like an A-shaped hut, Rabbi Eliezer invalidates it because it has no roof, but the sages validated it. So the question, and then they discuss different kinds of A-shaped tents and whether there was a little bit of a roof and how much is a little bit and how much is suitable. And if you've just got the two walls like that, if that's regarded as schach at all or not. Okay. Now, we know that on Daf Zayin Amud Bet, we have some pictures and we have a circle. And what's that talking about? It's talking about a sukkah in the shape of a circle, a round sukkah, I should say. And if that is a good sukkah, and it says there, Rabbi Yochanan said, a sukkah like a lime kiln. And Rashi says that's a round sukkah. If its circumference is large enough to seat 24 people, it's valid. And if not, it's invalid. And what you are invited to do at this particular sukkah is take the chairs and put them in and count whether you can fit 24 in there. Spoiler alert, you can. So that is, according to most opinions, regarded as a okay sukkah. Here we have a sukkah on the back of a wagon, and you can see sometimes we attach the donkey as well, just to give you the full experience. I should say that during the whole year, you can go and see the Sukkah exhibit. Only on Sukkot time, we have the Sukkot that incorporate animals as well. We don't have them wandering around during the year. And so if you want the full experience, come on Sukkot with the donkey attached, for example, over here. Sukkah on a wagon, is it kosher or is it not? And as you know, most people say yes. Okay, next. This is me climbing into the tree house. Sukkah built in a tree. Is it kosher or is it not? The question is, if the branches above the tree house are providing schach, if they're too thick, if they're regarded as the schach themselves, then because they're attached to the tree, which is of course attached to the ground, the living tree, it would not be suitable because schach has to be detached from the ground. But if your tree house is perched on the top of the treetop and there are no branches overhead, absolutely fine. Okay, what we've got here is Joe and I in front of reading the sign in front of the sukkah that is built on the ground under the tree. Here's a pictorial depiction of that particular tree. And let's read the text that we were reading. It says, if one made a sukkah beneath a tree, it is as though he made it inside a house. That's in the Mishnah Sukkah. And said Rabbah, the sages were referring to a tree whose shade was greater than the light that passed through the branches. But if there is more light than shade under the tree, the sukkah is valid. So it depends on the thickness and the how densely covered the sukkah is by the tree branches above. Okay, next. Here we have, yeah, you can see there are just two walls that meet at a point like this, two walls. And this raises the question of how many walls do you need to make a kosher sukkah? And then you ask the question whether the third wall, how big does it have to be and where is it placed? Is a tefach enough? Does it have to be more than that, less than that, on one side, on the other side? Is that a kosher sukkah? This sukkah, I don't know if you can see it really. I don't know if the photo is great, but what it is you've got a wall and you've got a branches like this, so a wall like this, and we call it a lean-to, and whether that is regarded as a kosher sukkah. Okay, next. This one. Oh, yeah. So this one is, what do you do when you have an animal who is stationed next to a wall, and you've got whether that animal's body is regarded as a suitable wall of a sukkah, or if he's going to move away and leave you in the lurch. And what kind of animal is it? When we set up this this particular exhibit on Sukkot, we don't use an elephant. We use a donkey, I think. Yeah, pretty sure. Now, Sukkah on a boat, kosher, not kosher. Looks pretty good to me. And finally, we all love the Sukkah on the camel, which is a pretty good Sukkah. So there are more. There are other ones that I didn't show you here, but come to Neot Kedumim. You can come by yourself and have a self-guided tour, or you can arrange to have a guide to take you around, or you can arrange a whole group of Daf Yomi people to come and we'll take you around and with our Massechet open, and that's always a wonderful experience. Now, I also want to talk about why Neot Kedumim has this Sukkah exhibit at all. I mean, it's we have the space, but that's not the only reason. It's because Neot Kedumim, as I said, is a biblical landscape reserve, and the idea was to have all the trees and the flowers and the plants that are mentioned not only in the Tanakh, but in the Mishnah and the Gemara and the Midrash and all of the Jewish sources, the wider Jewish sources, so that we can understand those sources better by understanding nature, and vice versa. We can understand nature better through learning the sources. So since we have all of this wonderful flora, we try to make our Sukkot from those trees and branches and plants and shrubs. And we then are asking ourselves the question from Sukkah Daf Lamed Vav Amud Bet, where it says, you shall dwell in Sukkot. And Rabbi Meir says, Sukkot made of any material, a very wide view. But then Rabbi Yehuda says, a Sukkah should be made only from the 4 species. And of course, we have the 4 species. At the park, we have an entire section. And we discussed this issue, whether that was practical, whether that was something that should be recommended. And we have a Sukkah that brings the verse in Nehemiah to life, Nehemiah Perek Chet, Pasuk Tet Vav, where it says, Ba'asher yishme'u ve'ya'aviru kol bechol areihem u'v'Yerushalayim lemor tzu hahar ve'heviu alei zait v'alei etz shemen. I highlighted that. V'alei hadas v'alei tmarim v'alei etz avot la'asot sukkot kakatuv. And that they must announce and proclaim throughout their towns and Jerusalem as follows: go out to the mountains and bring leafy branches of olive trees. And the words that I highlighted were Va'alei etz shemen, because that's the subject of some debate, often translated as pine trees. But in Neot Kedumim, we give the different options. It could be pine, it could be laurel, alei daphna, or it could be a Russian olive. And the next one is Va'alei hadas, which is myrtle. Va'alei tmarim, and palm branches. Oh, sorry, other way around. Palm branches and myrtle branches. La'asot sukkot kakatuv. So here we see in this verse that it's not just the arbat aminim, it's a much wider view of what you could make your sukkot from. And we discuss why that was at this time. Interestingly enough, if we want to focus on over here, it's got Va'alei hadas, right? And it also says Va'alei etz avot. Now, we're differentiating between alei hadas and alei etz avot. And we know often that we amalgamate the two, and we say that hadas is the etz avot. So what's going on there? And we discuss, when it talks about enough etz avot in the original pasuk that described the arbat aminim, what it is. Is it the myrtle? Is it the hadas? Or is it something else? I just want to tell you that I adore myrtle. I adore hadas, and it's growing around the park. A lot of people have it in private gardens. You should know that in nature, it is a protected species, but many public gardens are filled with hadas because it's great in the Israeli climate, and it's got such a wonderful fragrance. It's just a lovely, pleasant evergreen plant. Also with flowers, lovely flower, fruit that is less well known, that the fruit is edible. I know that we say there are only 2 of the Arabat Aminim that are edible, but what can you do? And the hadas is edible, but we discuss what are etzavot, and we learned that it said, the Gemara says that oleander or harduf was another option. And very interesting that, as the Gemara explains, the harduf is lovely to look at, but it is a poisonous plant. And everybody should know this, although it's also planted all over Israel in public gardens. It's very poisonous, and you shouldn't touch it, and certainly your children shouldn't go near it. Lovely flower to look at, but poisonous. So it was deemed not to be suitable for the Arabat Aminim, because it's not pleasant in that it's poisonous. There are other options of what could have been suitable for the Alea Etzavot. The olive tree even was considered as a candidate, but the foliage wasn't regarded to be thick enough, and so it was thrown out as an option. So that is what I wanted to tell you about the Sukkot exhibit at Neot Kedumim, and to invite you to come to Neot Kedumim and see with your own eyes, and enjoy being there. And thank you, and Mazel Tov to everybody who has completed Massechet Succah, and onward and upward. Thank you. Okay, let's stop recording.